Okay. We can start, okay. Dear friends, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you all. And I am Mr. Francesco Marcolini. I am a CEO of an Italian consultancy, Green Hill Advisory. It's an Italian consultancy well focused in the field of environment. We are focused in the field of finance for environment. So we follow Italian companies at national and international level to get money for their project for environment. And so Mr. Bartolomucci is the global organizer of diplomacy, asked me to manage and to lead this workshop. We have with us a famous writer in the field of climate change, Mr. Magnason, and Rossella Bozzini is the head of sustainability of the airport of Rome. We have online Mr. Tellini, head of sustainability of the main Italian bank, San Paolo, Istituto San Paolo. Okay, I believe we can start now and don't waste time. After this two speech, I will take another few minutes for some of my comments on this topic, especially in the field of finance, because as I told you, this is my focus. The climate change is one of the biggest, maybe the big problem of our age. But we have to understand that beside the problem of climate change, there is a global economic and financial approach. If you don't think so, if you forget this kind of approach, we cannot understand the development of this problem and we cannot figure out how to try to solve it, on how to try to approach it in the best way. So I give the floor to Mr. Magnason, writer, and afterwards, I will give the floor to Mrs. Bozzini. Please.
Yes, it's nice to meet. I think I met some of you at the bar yesterday. I hope you had not too many beers, so you remember what I said. My name is Andris Nær Magnason. I'm a writer, so I'm not an economist, but I try to understand these issues. I would say, like I was addressing yesterday, that if we look at the issue of climate change, then this is a paradigm shift that confronts almost all the systems that we are currently living in. That is, it asks the question, does democracy work? That is democracy, is it capable of thinking 10 years, 20 years, 30 years into the future? That is, how can we install long-term thinking? It confronts the systems of law. That is, what is legal to do today that we know will have consequences 10, 20, 30, 50 years into the future? It addresses every aspect of design and industry. That is, what products should be legal if we already know that they are more harmful than useful. So it confronts almost every single aspect of the systems that you are entering and we are entangled in. So it asks questions of our kind of rights. That is, what rights do I have to cause? What rights does this generation have on behalf of the 2050s, 60s, 70s, versus the rights of the people now to use resources that might be harmful for your future? So this is also a generational conflict, because I think most generations sincerely believe that they were making life better for future generations. I think when we built roads, transportation, all our innovation, I think we sincerely believed that we were making life easier for the next generation. We were sacrificing now for our children to go to schools. We were sacrificing now so we could go to hospitals. So basically the systems were all about that, but now we're in this strange dilemma where so much of our system is knowingly not benefiting the future. So the question is, how fast can we make this transition of just the energy transition, and how can we do that without the consequences being socially possibly worse than the consequences of global warming? That is, how can we do it without mass unemployment, mass poverty, or mass kind of that is a massive disruption of society, so people start kind of questioning the whole system in itself, and we have some kind of a chaotic situation. Just like when they tried to raise gas prices in France, we had the yellow vests come out and burning cars. So I think it also questions the role of government versus the role of individuals. It is, do we feel like we're going fast enough? We have seen banks bailed out with billions and billions and billions of dollars, but I don't think we have seen a similar approach to mass deployment of finance into this sector. We have seen, then we have other metaphors in our democracies, like, so you could ask the question of, is it financially viable to address climate change? But then the other question is it even a question of not addressing climate change? That is because the consequences are so dark. So if you look at like the Second World War, where people, nations put up to 50% of the GDP into an effort, a war effort, where they diverted resources, manpower, research, know-how. They diverted everything to a certain cause, which was the cause of war in the 1940s. Is that possibly an approach that we have to discuss, of basically deployment of resources, talent, finance, and focus to this certain cause? Or will it be solved only through some kind of a natural transition of green products versus non-green products, or some kind of tax incentives? Is the traditional approach of the last 20 years possible? Or do we have to look at some more radical approaches like we saw in the Corona crisis, where things were actually imposed on us, and it was difficult, but it was imposed on every single one? Or are we thinking that the current system will actually seamlessly deal with this within the financial system that we have? Or do we need some kind of totally different approach to economy? So I think that is the big question.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rossella Bozzini, Head of Sustainability in Aeroporti di Roma. I'm an environmental engineer. And I think almost of you passed from Fiumicino or Ciampino to arrive here or to go somewhere. So I think you know the airport. Before COVID, we had 45 million passengers. So it's the main airport in a system in Italy. And we are facing, like all airports, but all the aviation sector, the problem of climate change. Just to give you some numbers, the aviation sector impacts on CO2 emission for 2% at global level. So do you think 2% is big? It's not big? What do you think about this number? It's it seems quite small, but it's not so small if you compare to the global emission. And the other point is that compared to other sectors, like the road sector or the energy sector, aviation isn't ready. There is no technology ready to change. So this is the problem of aviation sector. That means that we have to invest in research, new technologies, and invest in new plans for the decarbonization of the sector. The emission, 90% of this 2% comes from flights, and 10% come from airports. So regarding airports, it's more easy, the decarbonization path. Like Rome Airport, we have the goal to become net carbon in 2030, so 20 years before the European goal. And we are already carbon neutral. That means that we are investing a lot in changing. So we are passing from a fossil fuel used to produce energy, thermal energy and electricity, and with a big investment of 60 megawatt of solar plants. This will be accompanied also from other investments in the fleet, so electrification of the fleets, and all the new terminal, new infrastructure are green infrastructure, so they are certified low emission. This is our commitment. To reach this goal also, it's important to invest in research, and we have two innovative projects financed by EU. The first one is a pioneer project that is use a second life battery to make energy storage of 10 megawatt. So the energy we produce from solar power, we can storage in these plants and then use, for example, during the night when we don't have electricity coming from the sun. The other project is a project of green airports, it's called Smart Airports, and it's a study to bring SAF, that is a sustainable aviation fuel, so fuel not coming from fossil fuel, but coming from oils and waste, that is possible to use in airline and in the flights. So this is the more ready solution to decarbonize the flights, SAF. At the moment, SAF is used by air company. Fiumicino made the first flight using SAF last year with ITA, but it's not possible to use 100% SAF for technical reason. So the maximum SAF is around 50%. So we still need to invest in research, in the development of technologies, also for the air transport.
And now, before giving the floor to Mr. Tellini, just a minute for a question to you, just to share a thought that I have in my mind. We cannot talk about sustainability and we cannot talk about facing the climate change we have just European Union as a global actor. As you know, the main two actors of the emission of carbon dioxide are China and India. And if we don't have this country at the table to discuss this matter, I believe that all our workshop, conference, rallies on the street are maybe useless. So I want to raise a question to you, and if possible to receive an answer now. You should take in your mind that this should be one of the main tasks of your future. Try to involve these countries that are not so far as we believe to sit at this table in order to discuss with the European Union about global sustainability. Otherwise, I believe that our Earth won't have a future anymore. I know that you have different tracks of life. You get a degree and you get a job. But if we forget this matter, as we forgot this matter during our entire life, I believe that we don't have a future. You don't have a future. So you should take in your mind that this could be and should be one of the main tasks of your entire life. I finished that. If you have a question about this, or if you have some comments about this suggestion, we are, please.
Good evening, sir. My name is Gokul. I'm a global governance second year student from India itself. What you said was right, that China and India, though our carbon emissions are large in comparison to other countries. But sir, with all due respect, I believe that China is producing everything. It's a manufacturing power. Though is India. From my phone to my suit to my tie, everything is made in China. So of course their carbon emissions are going to be always on the rise. Though is India. India is now manufacturing iPhones. India is now manufacturing because the manufacturing sector, according to me, of course it's my opinion, is moving from China to India. So of course, if China is producing everything, nuts and truckets, buckets and everything, though I don't agree with China's ideology and with everything, but if we only consider the manufacturing sector, I think if USA or EU tries to manufacture these products that China and India manufacturing, their carbon emissions are also going to rise at the same level. So I think rather than talking about, sitting at the table, what we can talk about is that how can EU and US also become a manufacturing power rather than producing just raw materials? Because I think EU and the West also needs to become a manufacturing power, because the whole world right now is dependent on China and India. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, just a minute. We don't want to point our finger against India. Just to take in mind that India and China are really low and are really taking behind in lifting a carbon dependence. Okay, and so if they don't try to convert their economy to a sustainability approach, a sustainable approach, I believe that we don't have future. We know that the main actor in the world is China, I know. But listen and tell me that India is on the same way, okay? Now, I give the floor to Mr. Tellini, Head of Sustainability of Italian Bank San Paolo, and Mr. Tellini is online.
Hello, can you hear me?
I believe it's online.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Okay.
So I go ahead, yeah? Buonasera. So first of all, of course, many thanks to Centro Studi Americani for inviting us to take part to this important conversation. And of course, Intesa San Paolo is really proud of being able to support once again this important dialogue, as has been just underlined. This is about also the future for not only the future generation, but actually for our present generation. Let me just start clarifying that I'm not a head of sustainability, but just the head of circular economy at Intesa San Paolo Innovation Center, which is a company fully owned by Intesa San Paolo, which you know is the most important banking group in Italy and among the top 3 at European level. And I had the privilege to lead the initiatives of circular economy, which for us does have an important characteristic in order to somehow evolve the conversation about sustainability. What just been mentioned before at the beginning, I totally support, did flag the necessity to rethink the way we are somehow supporting and the way in which finance is supporting specifically developments and ventures around the world. So let me just take this chance to propose a sort of vision that from our side could be seen as a sort of framework within which we can deploy our resources, our effort. First of all, the twin transition is crucial, and this is already clear. But if I may, I would like to somehow solicit a sort of a reaction from the audience, because when we talk about circular economy in specific terms, we actually want to go beyond what is the standard concept of sustainability for one specific reason. Because, again, I want to be provocative just to somehow stimulate the conversation and the dialogue. But in practical terms, there's been already 25, 27 years of global efforts in the field of sustainability. And this is a very good thing. But the very same actors, the very same players and the promoters of the sustainability agenda at global level have been pretty vocal, even recently, I mean, not latest than 2018, and I'm talking about Sir John Elkington, one of the fathers of the sustainability agenda, and actually the father of the definition of triple bottom line. They have been pretty vocal about the fallacies of this approach. They have been pretty vocal, and they have been somehow very clear in saying, look, sustainability has been important, but has not been sufficient and effective in solving the issues. And we believe one of the reasons could be because we have been focusing too much, perhaps in the last 30 years, on the effects of this linear economy, linear way of creating value, rather than looking at the causes, at the root causes of how the system has been engineered and designed. And this is where circular economy kicks in. Because for us, circular economy does not want just to make the linear economy, the economy that we all know, the actual system, just more sustainable. Circular economy wants to change the system. There is a difference between being less environmentally harmful, like being sustainable, and being circular. Circular economy is not just trying to emit less CO2 or trying to be less bad towards the natural capital. Circular economy, and this is the definition that we derive from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which you know is the most important and authoritative network player at global level, which is supporting the acceleration of the systemic transition toward the circular economy. Circular economy wants to be regenerative of the natural capital, of course, of the social capital and the economic capital, in the sense of trying to shift the way we think about value creation. And so this is important because going back to the first point, when we were talking about the energy transition, be careful. All of us are pretty clear in terms of what has to be done in changing the mix of resources that do propel and sustain economic activities. But if we shift only the energy mix and we do not change business models and the way business is conducted and the way products are made and the way products are used, we bear the risk of supercharging the linear model. What we need is to redesign the model. So of course there is the twin transition, but this is not just a green, this is not just an environmental transition. This is an economic one. Last year in October, so basically almost 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago, here in Italy, in the center of Italy, there was an important event, a workshop. And one of the most important economists in Italy, Stefano Zamagni, from Bologna University, and today is the chairman of the Pontifical Academy for Societal Sciences, has been saying, look, and of course the workshop was about the circular economy, the disaster within which we are confronting ourselves, he said, and I mean, it was even before the crisis and the war and the dramatic situation we are now. As I said, it was already 1 year ago. He said, the problem is that we economists, when we did somehow design the modern economic theory, we did put into labor and capital. We left out nature. Now it's time to put nature back into the equation. This was coming from Stefano Zamagni, one of the most reputable economists in Italy. What I want to say is that don't look at the circular economy, of course, only as a recycle and reuse economy. Of course, this is important, but it's like looking at the moon and trying to identify the moon just looking at one slice of the moon. Circular economy, it says the word itself. It's, first of all, economy. It's the new economy. And why I say so? Because I want to be very concrete. Look, for example, at the usual products that you daily use, right? When we look, for example, at the plastic bottle, we tend to believe that the problem is in the plastic. Of course, we all know there is an issue in complying and trying to limit plastic pollution. But if we look again, not at the effects, but at the causes, we well understand that the problem may be not plastic. Plastic is a fabulous, tremendous, important material. The issue actually is in the use, is in the utilization that we do make of such a product. When I drink orange juice from a carton and I use a plastic straw, which is made by a material, which is designed, which has been invented to last for decades, and I use a plastic straw just for 30 seconds, and then I dismiss it, the problem is not the plastic. The problem is in the use that I make of such an important material. So again, there is a rethink and a rethinking exercise that has to be made in terms of how we do use resources. And I go to the definition of what circular economy is. Circular economy is not just a sustainable economy. Circular economy is the attempt of segregate the economic and social development from the exploitation of finite natural resources. Nothing less, but also nothing more. And so what we are trying to say is that Intesa Sanpaolo has been very concrete in supporting such kind of shift. This is a paradigmatic shift in the way we create value. Since 2016, Intesa Sanpaolo is the first bank globally strategic partner of the foundation I mentioned before, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And we did become strategic partner in our conviction that finance is key in supporting the systemic transition, in making sure that there is a new way of doing business models, there is a new way in designing the relationships along value chains, there is a new way in thinking about our approach to resources, to materials, to objects, and to the material consumptions. And so since 2018, in the first strategic plan that did care about circular economy, the 4-year plan, strategic plan of Intesa Sanpaolo 2018-2021, Intesa Sanpaolo made available for our clients 6 billion euros to finance circular innovation, to finance projects and investments that do have circular economy components. And at the end of last year, at the end of 2021, we disbursed more than 7.7 billion euros for this scope. In the new strategic plan of Intesa Sanpaolo 2022-2025, there are now 8 new billion facility available for our clients. This is a very concrete example. And I want to point out a specific aspect that we do believe is crucial when present generations and future generations can look at the role that circular economy can have. We do have evidence now from an important relationship that we developed with University Bocconi here in Milan. There is a research which is now public, has been published and has been authored and reviewed from a scientific standpoint, that there is an evidence that companies that do embrace the circular transition which means changing business model, changing materials, changing the way the value created is within the company. The more a company becomes circular, the less it is risk from a credit standpoint. So a company becoming more circular, there is an evidence, scientific evidence, does have a lower credit default risk, both at short-term 1 year and 5-year terms, which means circular economy is an important de-risking perspective for the economy, but only and only if we look at the circular economy as a whole, not just as I was anticipating, just in terms of the environmental, which is clear components, but actually, and there is also a social component, very, very important, from a holistic approach. So circular economy as the new economy going forward. And I close. This is where diplomacy is so crucial. Diplomacy can really help systems, countries, regions, communities to come together in making sure there is a collective effort for change. There is a sort of collective intuition which makes design and actually redesign the center of the redesign of the economy. As for the example of the plastic bottle, the problem is not in how much more we can recycle, which is clear, it's important, but it's not going to solve the problem. The issue is how much we are able to redesign the bottle, how we are able to use bio-based materials, how we are able to reconvene a conversation at global level on how value chain can be redesigned. And the news is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation I was anticipating before has been mandated by the United Nations already March this year to redesign the global value chain for plastic. There will be a plastic new United Nations treaty which will convene a global conversation on how plastic is designed, is produced, is used, is convened, and then is recollected, and once again, is started again. So I close saying that, of course, for us, this is a tremendous collective challenge. This is where there is a systemic thinking, and again, a sort of evolution from the standard sustainability agenda. Circular economy wants to make sure that there is a conceptualization of a systemic impact, systemic relationships within the economy. As it was anticipating at the beginning, economy has been designed by us, by mankind. Mankind can redesign the economy. It's not just to make it only just more sustainable. We need to make sure that we are able to have a regenerative approach to value creation, which will have then very important social implications in making sure that future generations will have access to natural resources that as of today are going to be somehow depleted. And more importantly, there is the alliance, there is the open innovation approach, there is the collaboration among different stakeholders to make sure that people are at the center of this, because as Ellen MacArthur says, design is at the core. Everything has been designed already. With the circular economy, everything can be redesigned. Here in Milan, we do have the Circular Economy Lab, which is an important establishment with our partner, Fondazione Cariplo and Cariplo Factory. With the Circular Economy Lab, we try to be the partner of choice for companies, startups that want to embrace on a journey, which is a transformative journey. So I believe that if you believe this could be an interesting conversation to have, and I believe, of course, this is the question where future generations and present generations are somehow invited to take part in the reshape of the economic system that, as beginning was anticipated, is a crucial question for our time. Thanks for your time. And of course, I'm sorry for not being there physically, but I remain available for any sort of additional information or clarification you may need from your side. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Tellini. Now I ask to the speaker a short second round of intervention, just for 5 minutes, in order to give a defined approach to the matter, okay? And especially, from my point of view, the geopolitical approach I told before, because I believe that without this kind of approach, we are living the risk of wasting time and time. So now I ask to the speaker, what do you believe about a global approach to the matter? As we know that the European Union is on the right way, and the other countries in the world, and the United States. So I make this question to the speakers. What do you believe about this matter? And what do you believe we, as Italian, and the European Union, as a global association of European states, could do for this purpose? Okay.
Yes, the problem of this issue, or you could say problem, or the good or bad thing, is that either everyone wins or everyone loses, because one country cannot solve this in a pocket if everybody else is not solving it. The other thing is that still, even though others are not solving it, then solutions found in one country can be developed and then eventually spread to other places. So the good thing, for example, about renewables is that they are already showing that they create more resilient societies. So Iceland developed geothermal energy in the 30s, so we have not been addicted to coal and oil to heat during the winter. We would need a whole nuclear power plant or a huge coal plant if we were to heat Reykjavik only during the winter, but now we only have it as a circular system where we turned the disadvantages of Iceland, which is the cold and the volcanoes, into an advantage to heat our houses. In the same way, now we see what we get when we are addicted to Putin or coal and oil from either dictator states, and we keep that going instead of putting that resource into developing local resources, which actually science proves we actually do all have. We have the sun, we have the wind, we have the heat pumps, we have everything at hand to transition. And of course, we would like to see, so it is good for the whole Europe if there's a big solar initiative in Spain and Italy. So of course that makes sense globally. And then when those solutions are scaled up, that's also big hope for nations that are maybe not yet developed, or where there is an abundance of sunlight, for example, and those nations can maybe develop through solar energy instead of going through the same phase as all the industrial nations of going first through coal and oil. It's possible that nations that still need to develop can do like you see in Africa in many places where they went straight to the smartphone and they never went through the landline. So it's possible to jump over certain steps in development. It's not inevitable that nations need to develop through coal and oil anymore, but it gets easier the quicker the European Union phases out of oil. Then it becomes easier to other nations to do that. But what we can ask ourselves is, in the mindset, is that for the first, we cannot probably compensate one-on-one, that is the new economy that is solar and wind or circular, will probably not look exactly like the economy that we're currently living in, because that was based on so much excess of coal, oil, and gas, the superpowers that we have been getting from coal, oil, and gas. The new economy probably needs another approach to design, architecture, transportation. So basically that new economy will not use as much energy at first, at least. And then we can also ask ourselves the mindset, because the outcome of this rational system that we're living in, the rational industry design, the rational policies, laws, is not very rational. And can we find some other relationships with nature that is still found with indigenous places, where places are culturally or naturally even holy or something. Can we leave nature? Can we leave any places as they are, undisturbed? Can we live in harmony with other species? Or will this new development of the energy transition, will it be totally technocratical, where we will just use the same mindset just in another set of technology? So I think, and this is of course a very excellent group because it's diverse and international, and just to understand that many of the systems that we take for granted today, like the United Nations, they did not exist when my grandmother was born. That was so the United Nations were unthinkable when my grandmother was born, but suddenly a generation created the United Nations. So at some point it was an idea, and at some point that idea was materialized and became an institution. So you could ask yourself, what kind of institution, what kind of forum does the climate crisis call for? Does it happen within the United Nations? Or is there some kind of a thing that we don't know yet, that does not exist today, but will exist after 20 years, because that's the body that will be created in the light and in the fight against the global climate crisis? So you can just think that. What does that institution look like? Can that institution mobilize 1 million young people to do something? Can it make a law that gives us some light? Does it have research? Just think, what can such an institution do? And if you look at how people were vaccinated in the 70s, or how, just what kind of mobilization does such an institution have? You can just think about it.
Yes, the company and the business has a great duty, that is, as the colleague from Intesa told, to change the business model. But also I think there is another important issue, that is to influence their stakeholders. And for example, for an airport, the most important stakeholder are passengers. And how do passengers reach the airports? You usually are focused on emission of flights, but also there is important of emission connecting to the connection between the airport and the city or the final destination. And just a quick poll, you passed from Fiumicino, you say, how many of you reach the city by car, so by taxi or by personal car when going to the airport? Okay, the most. And how many of you took the train? And the bus? Okay, I think you represent well. We make some poll in the airports to understand how passengers arrive to the airports. And before COVID, 60% reach the airport by car, and while 20% by train and 20% by bus. So, like airport, we have the commitment to reduce this emission connected to people reaching the airports. And we have an agreement with Ferrovie to increase the number of trains arriving. So now we have 110 couples of train connecting Rome Center to the airports, one every 7 minutes during the day. And also we are working on interconnection. That means high velocity speed train arriving from cities like Naples, Florence, and in the future also Bari, directly to the airport. So the point is to help the passenger, so help you to make a more sustainable choice in the mobility from the airport to your final destination. And because for long flight, you don't have choice to reach. If you want to go to India, for example, you need to take a flight. But if from Rome you need to go to Naples, and you have a choice, and the choice is based on economic factor, how does it cost, but also on the logistic factor. Is the timetable comfortable to me? Can I take a train and or I have to wait half a day? And so this is our commitment to intermodality, because short flight, the one more used for, are the most emitting flights compared to the long flights, because the way in which, in the moment in which the plane arrives is the more emission. So this is another point, to change the mentality, to change the behavior of a business, but also to change the mentality of people, of passenger, of citizen, to make the right choice.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, Mr. Tellini, for a second round, what's your opinion about the global approach of the topic? So what could be the international role of a great bank in order to push and in order to support the other government to approach the environmental problem and to approach the problem of sustainability? Please.
No, first of all, I will go back to your point, but I just wanted to add an option to those that were anticipated by the executive from Aeroporti di Roma, because they have been anticipating recently that you will also have an aero taxi availability soon. Will be a sort of, I would say, very smart way. So there will be a sort of helicopter taxi leaving from Fiumicino to the city center, if I recall correctly, from TV program that was aired a couple of weeks ago. And this is astonishing if you believe what is being made in Italy, thanks also to Aeroporti di Roma, in terms of rethinking the way of mobility. This is exactly what we were anticipating before. This is not just limiting the emission, but actually to try to have a different way of thinking about connectivity and the last mile connection. Going to the point of global perspective, for sure, this is a collective challenge. And if it's so, then there is a collective action that has to be taken. But if I may stress again, one of the ideas is that we all have been studying, growing, working in the linear system. Our books did teach us about a linear way of thinking, about a linear way of doing things, about a linear way to think about resources, consumption, production, economy, and so on, and so on, and so on. I would say that, of course, we all have to do our own parts, but the very first step, I guess, is to try to focus and try to agree. Of course, the more, the better. So from a global perspective, that would be tremendously important, on the need to equip ourselves with a different line of thinking to address new problems. We cannot solve new challenges with old concepts, with old habits, with old way of doing things. This is where complexity is. And this is exactly what I anticipated before. Sustainability had a tremendous impact and a tremendous important role in flagging how the actual system is producing somehow unwanted consequences that do make the actual system unbearable. What we do now, it's about a collective exercise of thinking to redesign what we, as I said beginning, we did design, which is the economy. And so at global level, for sure, the multilateral agencies, of course, can drive the conversation. But let me express my personal opinion here. I would say education is going to be globally the most important aspect that we can focus and invest right now to make sure that we are able to think in a circular way. Ellen MacArthur, which, as you know, did found the Ellen MacArthur Foundation itself, did have a tremendous success in her actually attempt to circumnavigate the globe, solo sailing around the globe. Well, the sort of exceptional lesson that she derived from such a sort of effort and tremendous success, it's a very simple question, but which I believe does have a profound consequences. If nature, she said, is circular, why the economy has to be linear, she said. This is the very profound question that I believe in every part of the world we can exercise on trying to answer, mind the fact that not all the answers have to be equal. One important aspect to me is that, of course, standardization is not required in the circular economy. Every territory, each community can have its own approach to circularity. And this goes back to the point that, for example, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation did make an important study when it was about the opportunities arising from the Chinese system, like also what were the opportunities arising from the Indian systems. And the difference is that, and it was a report, I would say, issued already 3 or 4 years ago, the findings was that, for example, just because it's been anticipated before, India, thanks to a circular transition, should have had modernization without linear industrialization. So this is important because it gives a sort of perspective on how differently made you can achieve sustainability, development, equity, intergenerational equity, not following the very same path that has been followed so far. And as you said, and I totally believe your perspective is accurate in making sure that this requires a global perspective. But of course, Europe, as of today, can be seen as a front runner, but Europe needs the collaboration, of course, of the different communities, for sure, from the geopolitical entities that are today facing with such profound rethinking exercise. The European Union can be seen as a sort of strategic front runner for one specific reasons, because we in Europe, we do import 6 times what we are able to export. So Europe does have, in the circular economy perspective, the only way forward to redesign its economy and to make it attractive and competitive. This is not Max Stellini. This is Franz Timmermans, the first vice president of the European Commission back in 2015, back in 2020, and now 2022. Why I'm saying so? Because in March this year, the European Commission did prepare a proposal of regulation that has been then submitted to the European Parliament and to the European Council, where written black and white on paper, there is a proposal. The European economy has to shift to an economic model which is circular by design. And the European Union, the European Commission is stressing 2 specific sectors, construction and fashion, as 2 specific sectors that may drive the transition towards a circular economy. Why so? Because those are the sectors that, for sure, first of all, do need a lot of resources. And so there is a lot of circular potential to be exploited, but also because they have a clear connection to us, people, citizens, users, customers, clients. And so this is crucially important. I believe, as European citizen, I can be really proud of what European institutions are making, because there is paragraph 5 of that proposal. There is written again that servitization is going to be the business as usual for Europe going forward. There is a stress on the concept that there is not so important anymore to own a product. it's much more important to provide access to the service which a product provides. This is crucial, and this is coming from European Union 2022. So in a nutshell, of course, this is a global effort, but European Union is somehow leading the conversation, and we believe that people at the center of this strategic redesign can, from all over the different realities and geopolitical contexts, contribute to a collective redesign of how value is created in the economy thanks to the circular approach.
Thank you, Mr. Tellini. Now we have some minutes of Q&A session. So if you have some question to the speakers, you can raise your hand.
So good afternoon, and thank you for your speeches. My name is Paolo Mattei. I'm a second year global governance student, and I have one question with a little bit of background, and it is, are we sure that we are pursuing the right path, and are we sure that Europe is leading this change? Because in these days we had many days and many conversations with speakers, and we understood that, for example, Europe is pursuing the path of electrification, for example, and that we are investing, yes, in circular economy, but I think in a biased way, and we are biased by financial system and by ideology. And this is because, for example, we pursue the path of electrification but for cars and for transportation, but we had the chance, and we still have the chance, to use different fuels, for example, hydrogen. And as maybe you can remember, 2 weeks ago, for example, in Great Britain, Shell dropped its last distributor of the last point where cars could use hydrogen, so it's not usable anymore. And we pursue the path of electrification, like using minerals and exploiting other natural resources. And the path of circular economy, for example, in Europe, I think it is not so implemented because we think at recycling, but we do not think at reusing and buying used things. And we think we are doing good, but for example, countries like Africa or China buy used things, used technology, used vehicles from us, and I think that there is a more, but I would love also to hear your points. I think this is like more loyal to circular economy ideology, because, for example, that technology that they buy from us secondhand could be converted to, for example, sustainable fuels. And to this, I would also like to ask to you, at what point we have arrived with sustainable fuel in the aviation sector? Thank you.
Just now we give an answer to this question, then we collect all the questions and then we give the answer. Otherwise we stay here all the afternoon.
That's a very good point, because electrification is not the solution from my point of view, but it's one of the solutions. So at this moment of our technology development, for every sector, we don't have one magic solution, but we have a lot of technologies who are developing and will help to find the solution in a mix of them. So coming back to the aviation, we have different technologies who are developing to reach net zero. One of them is electrification, but for example, electrification to the aviation is used only for short flights. The example the colleague spoke about about our volocopter is a e-taxi, a flying taxi that will connect in 2 years the airports with the center of Rome. But this kind of solution is available only for very short track. Then we have hydrogen. Hydrogen seems to be the best solution for not the short period, but the medium-long period. But also hydrogen have problem that to be storage, you need a very, very low temperature. And for long flight, probably will not be the solution. We have SAF, so fuels coming from organic waste like oil, or also coming from production with electricity, so the eSAF. These are the most available and promising solution, but also we have problem of competition with food. So now to produce SAF, you need a lot of oil. In this moment, the most important producer use waste oil, like oils for McDonald's, for example. But the production of McDonald's is not able to support all the needed for fuel. So the second step will be to have a dedicated culture to produce oil. And this culture don't have to be competitive with food. So otherwise we solve a problem, but we create a bigger one. So the point is that we have to invest in research, in finding a solution to differentiate the technology and the solution. And in 10, 15 years time, I think we will have a different solution for different points. For example, short flights will have a solution, electrification, medium, we can have hydrogen, long can have a SAF produced, for example, for waste and not from oil.
Thank you very much. And now we collect the other
We are going
question.
to collect 3 questions because you are going to make a question, and you also, so 3 questions from here. They will answer. Then will be others 4 questions. How many people want to raise a question here? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So first the 3 here, they will answer. Then the 5 here. So.
Okay, so my name is Raul Elia, and I am a global governance student. First of all, thank you so much for your speech, for your presentation. I actually had 2 questions, but I will try to put them all in one. So my main question is, do you think that fighting climate change is something that we all should do, or we have to follow? Like, should the first one to act on climate change be the ones that, for example, pollute the most, but in a useless way? I take for an example, people that use private jets in order to do short flight. So in that order, people can, people spend a lot of oil, spend a lot of fuel. And also, I wanted to ask about, what do you think about all the activities of protest that are happening, for example, in Rome or in different museums? Because like 10 minutes ago, ecologists, always regarding the oil use, have damaged, if I'm not wrong, another famous painting in Haia. So I wanted to know your opinion on that. Thank you.
Good morning, I am Ghislain Mingo, a student coming from France, and my question is related to the increase of the plane ticket price. How plane companies could assure an ecological transitions of their activities without impacting the price of the tickets to keep their competitivity? For instance, Air France promulgated 3 months ago a tax that creates a huge increase of the plane tickets, sometimes more than 300 euros. How could people that suffer economical difficulties can deal with that? Or in other words, how airports can still be attractive in an ecological transition period? Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Francesco Mastidoro. I just wanted to comment on one of the things that have been said about the circular economy and the importance of education in managing this crisis. I strongly agree with this. I think that it's very important to teach a culture of limits. We have to understand that one of the most important things we have to do is to limit ourselves in doing some things. We cannot think that we can go to Naples with an airplane. I think this is unthinkable. We have to limit some things. We cannot use carton juice just for one single use. And I think that, yes, I think this is very important. We don't even need to introduce another subject. We can just study ancient Greeks and what they said, some of their concepts, catammetron. I think as Italian, I'm very proud of the fact that in Italy we still study ancient Greeks and what they said. I think they were one of the smartest, if not the smartest people ever existed. And I think it should be studied everywhere, because that is what we have to do.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for these questions. So like to the first question of that it's the mindset. So is it better to have an electric car or a hydrogen car? It's better to have public transport that is electric. So that's better. So fewer cars is better. Hydrogen versus, I'm not quite sure the damage of the battery versus the hydrogen car, because it needs about 3 times more energy to power the hydrogen car than the electric car. So in Iceland, for example, I have an electric car, and I don't feel it in my energy bill that I have an electric car. It costs 100 euros, no, 200 euros a year to power my electric car. It's kind of amazing actually how efficient these cars are, but it would be better not to have an electric car, but to have better transportation. Regarding activism, I have felt this kind of, when they have been throwing soup on paintings with glass in front of them, you know, so yet it's like they have not yet damaged anything. They've just been making like symbolic acts. But I don't really I don't see art and nature as opposites, but I see it more like this is desperation. That is, this is a generation that actually does feel the climate crisis in their bones, and they feel like this is the most symbolic thing. That it seems like people are feel more outrage against sabotage of a work of art than for 100 square kilometers of the Amazon forest. So there's some desperation in this. While I don't believe this is what I think we should be, I don't think we should be pointing art and environment as some kind of opposites. I think it's all human culture, human thinking, humanity. Art and nature is something that is a whole that I believe in, that we have to cherish. So we have to take care of old things and art just like nature. I don't remember the last question. Something about yeah. So I think, but I think everybody has the duty of doing some activism. And so is it a thing that we follow? I think the answer in such a big question, because it's a paradigm shift, it's about everything. The answer is yes. The answer is it individual activity? Yes. Is it a systematic change? Yes. Is it the big corporations? Yes. Is it my choice as a voter? Yes. Is it me as an individual, as a consumer? Yes. So it's yes, yes, yes. It's all aspects. So I can't divide myself from a citizen, a voter, a possible producer, a possible consumer. So it's just yes, as a father, as a son, as anything. So it's yes in every single aspect. So it's not either corporations or me, governments or me, law or me. It's what I can do everywhere I kind of have influence. Yes, as an artist.
I keep up the question about ticket flares. And the question is, who will pay for the transition? So if there are taxes on carbon, or if companies are obliged to use stuff that in this moment cost more than normal fuel, who will pay? So I think that we are in a moment of change, of transition also of technology, and the new technology needs to be supported. Let's think, I think 15 or 20 years ago, when renewables started, the renewables were supported by the state. Now, renewables, energy produced by renewable, is less expensive than energy produced with fossil fuel, due to the political situation, but also before the political, the war, the crisis, green energies cost the same or lower compared to fossil energies. So in this transition period, we need to be support by the private investor that are looking to invest in sustainable business, support by the state, because technology have to become mature, and when a technology is mature, the price of the product produced, in this case fuel, will become lower. So this is the first point. The second one is about equity. So if all the costs of transition go to private companies, air companies, and then from them go to the tickets, flying will become very expensive and only for rich people. Is this just? Is this the model that we want? That young people can go to the university, can go to meet their friends and so on? So the problem of equity is not to become a transportation system that we need for long distance, not for short one. For short one, we have other choice, other possibilities, not to become a transportation system only for business people or only for rich people.
Mr. Tellini, there is Mr. Tellini online.
Can you hear me?
Okay, please give us.
Sure. Now, in terms of what has been anticipated in the three questions, I would tend to see that, first of all, of course, personally speaking, I don't believe violence is legitimate in any sort of shape or form, but I do sense the frustration of young generations that do feel deprived of access to resources and to equitable future. So it's important to separate, of course, demonstration and passion from what actually cannot be tolerated in a sort of democratic way of expressing our own opinion. But going to the core of the line of thinking of the question, I would say this. Personally speaking, I tend to ask, rather than, okay, I know there are out there some kind of behaviors that maybe are not contributing to solve the problem. And we all know that for sure. And this is not going to say, okay, this is okay. But from a personal standpoint, and this is the opportunity that I do personally see with the circular economy specific, this is a line of thinking, a way of being human that each of us can make for his own. I don't tend to ask what others are trying to do or why they are not doing so. Before, I tend to ask and challenge my own sort of way and ask myself, what did I do today to regenerate natural capital? And frankly speaking, this question is daunting, because even if all other people are trying to be somehow good at limiting the impact, and I think the sense of the question was around there, this is still not enough. There is a different way of trying to solve such a complex and systemic challenge. As I said before, we try to see whether new challenges can be faced and maybe solved through a different approach. So try to ask yourself, if you want, every single day what you are going to do tomorrow to regenerate natural capital rather than watching what others are doing or not doing in becoming sustainable. Because the example that we as people, as citizens, and specifically, I would say younger generations can make, it's tremendous. I was anticipating the reflection about design because Ellen MacArthur in person said, look, with the circular economy, there is a new sort of excitement around because specifically young generation of designers, and there is at least 8 million people around the world working specifically on design. They say at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they are happy people today because what they realized, talking about the designers, is that everything has been already designed, and we all know. Thanks to the circular economy principles, everything can and should be redesigned. So there is plenty of opportunities for everybody to make our own contribution to a transition which is a different way of thinking. And so again, when you talk about the culture of limit, this is important from what I was anticipating, the culture, and also in terms of what we learn from university and business schools. Ellen MacArthur, when she did solo sail around the globe, she understood this very simple but important concept. Resources, natural resources, are finite. But business around the globe has always considered resources infinite. This is the crux of the matter. This is where there is a conflict, a contrast, a clash between what's the reality and what business and the economy have trying to make over the years. And so trying to reconnect this sort of conversation about the limit, it's important to make sure that we are able to create and extract value from the resources that we do already have, rather than trying to excavate and obtain from the natural capital more resources than what we do have already. So again, it's important to have a concept of limit, but not just because we need to limit our sort of way of living or our behaviors. It's important to understand the dynamics, the physics of how planet Earth works. And when we all understand that finite natural resources are finite, we will understand how it's important that even business models in companies around the world do take into consideration such a reality, not pretending that resources are infinite. And the last point in terms of oil and the transition. Look, we all know that the model is the linear model. So extract resources, make a product, sell it, use it, trash it. This is the linear approach. But personally speaking, again, I remind myself that we are talking about a system cannot be overjudged because, of course, it created the wealth that we all know and we are relying upon. So it's not easy to say, okay, this has been a wrong system. The system has to change because now it's time to change. But look, as of today, and this is from the United Nations acknowledgements, the economy, the global economy, still invests 5.3 trillion per year in subsidies to the oil and gas and fossil resources. So, of course, this is a time for transition, but also in terms of incentives, we need to make sure that there is a sort of an alignment between the objectives and the tools. And the United Nations recently, and I would say also the World Bank and all the development agencies are calling for a sort of realignment between tools and objectives. I think this is part of finding a clever solution to the problems that the question were underlining.
So now we are going to take other 5 questions for our panelists.
Good evening. I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Gokul. I'm a global governance second year student from India. My question specifically is to you, sir, Mr. Magnuson. Yesterday, I was very fascinated by your point of view at the Bar del Fico. So I want to take you back in time and want to focus on two revolutions that happened in Europe. Number one was the humanist revolution that happened during the Renaissance period. The second one was the Industrial Revolution, which was part of the European colonialism and the imperialism. Now, for me, I've been studying European colonialism very closely, and it is just my opinion that all this talks about climate change, whether it's income inequality, whether it's resource dependency, it's all because of European imperialism, of all the war crimes that were committed in the colonialistic countries. Of course, there were other wars. Of course, there was the Mongol Empire. So people were killed. But for me, the Industrial Revolution was funded by the countries from the colonial countries. And all those profits were stacked up into London and cities like Glasgow. My second point of view was about the humanist revolution, which is part of the Renaissance. Of course, there were new ideas coming up. But there is one thing common in both the revolutions. People were killed. Whether it was the Industrial Revolution, people in my country were killed. They were starving, and we were sending raw materials. And in the humanist revolution, people were killed because they were providing new ideas. One of the greatest examples is Copernicus, because he produced that the earth is in the middle of the sun and all that, and his ideas were discovered later. So my question to you is that, the first question is, do you agree with me that the European colonialism is one of the most heinous war crimes that were ever committed in the history? And my second question to you is that we have another revolution coming up, which is the big data, the tech revolution, whether we have the metaverse, and there's also Elon Musk who's talking about colonizing the planet Mars. So what would be the cost of this revolution? Thank you.
I'm going to take other 4 questions, then you will answer collectively.
Hello, thank you for being here. My name is Nicoleta Karpinska, and I am a second-year global governance student. And I wanted to ask you, how can we convince others, we as Europeans, since Europe is the leading, let's say, it's the leader in this climate change action, how can we want others to follow us and make the change with us when we don't really care about them? Or I will rephrase this, we care enough to hide the truth in Europe, and we pretend that we are following the climate change agendas in Europe. Like, for example, the French company Total Energies pretending to be totally green and telling the French people that they're sustainable and all of that. But in reality, they're just going to Africa, to Tanzania, Uganda, to South Africa, and they have this petrol extraction program that is absolutely going to kill marine life and all the fishermen that are living off of what they manage to fish in the ocean, and that's just going to die off. So we're not only going to destroy the planet, but we're also destroying their economy. Yet we're not talking about it. We're just hiding the truth from Europe, and we want Europe to follow this. And how can we pretend? How can we want them to change when they see our atrocities? And it's not the first time we're exploiting them. It just happens over and over again. It's just one of the many times in history that we're doing it, except we don't talk about it. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you to the speakers for being here and giving us such an insight on this topic. I am Fabiana Neiva, a global governance second year student from Bolivia. And my question can be also related to the question of my classmate here, Nicoletta, and more based on the developing countries. Taking into consideration that I come from a place that has one of the world's largest lithium reserves, and having seen how my country itself cannot manage to industrialize this, let's say, renewable energy, without the help of most economically powerful countries. My question would be, if the fight against climate change requires, as you said, a global approach and engagement from all countries, and taking into consideration that the needed measurements might not be always favorable for all countries, how can we make the developing countries actively engaged on this movement without becoming dependent economically on big powers?
Good evening, I'm Marici, I'm a second year global governance student. My question is directed to Mr. Tellini, and it's about how do you think that to implement rapidly circular economy, we need new policies, or we need to make it more appealing, make it look more appealing to businesses? And in addition, you said that change has to start with new generation, but when us, the new generation, will be entitled to make decisions, don't you think it's gonna be too late? Thank you.
Hello, thank you for being here. I'm Giovanna Capecchi, I'm also a second year student in global governance. And I had a question for Ms. Bolzini. Well, maybe it's more of a comment, I don't know. Because before you made the example of taking a train to go, or a car to go to the airport. And I was thinking about that and how we don't really have a choice on where, on taking the most sustainable option or not. Using that example, the train to go to Fiumicino costs 15 euros, which may seem like a small price, but when you add it to a trip that you paid for the flight, you paid for the accommodation, those 30 euros, because it's back and forth, actually add kind of a lot for our students to the budget. So is there a possibility to make the transport to the airport or in general in Rome more sustainable, in your opinion? Thank you. I mean, sustainable in price. Thank you.
Now the answer.
What was your name? So thank you for your question. Almost calls for a full lecture series. Yes. So I was just reading a book by Amitav Ghosh, The Nutmeg Curse, which is actually exactly taking your standpoint of colonialism and climate change as a mindset of seeing nature just as raw material to turn into products and colonizing places and all that. And that's of course a history that needs to be recognized and reconciliated. In my book, I'm looking more at how long it takes for a paradigm shift to be understood. So, for example, in the Icelandic language, we can see from a concept being introduced, like the concepts of the French Revolution. Iceland was a colony of Denmark, so we have a colonial history as well in Iceland. So, in 1809, the ideas of the French Revolution were introduced in a strange event. But you can see historically that we didn't understand it until in the 1850s, when it became like a real battle, and it wasn't until 1918 that we became independent. In 1918, women's rights were introduced in the forms of voting, that is the right to vote. And you would think women would believe they were equal to men, naturally, because they would think that. But actually we did not get an equally voted parliament until 2 years ago. That is, it took again 100 years from an idea to be introduced and executed until it came out. And I'm using that to make people think about the word, for example, ocean acidification, which is the first time humans understand that we can fundamentally change not the sea level, but basically the chemical balance of the oceans, and saying like, okay, that word was introduced in 2004. Is it such that it will take us 100 years to understand that? So we don't have time for that. I would think that despite colonialism, and we can argue that every aspects of that, that in general, if you read books like Hans Rosling, that an average human still we don't have total equality. We don't have a perfect system, but in general, an average human being today does have a higher quality of life and more choices than an average human 50, 100, or 200 years ago. So the big question is, and that I think you guys are probably better equipped to discuss that, to take this question into like what I was referring to before, like how do we take this discussion about global warming, the history of colonialism, the mindset of industrialization. So now, like China, that was maybe a victim of colonization, has now become like a global empire of production and commerce. So when that mindset has become set into another place, so I think that and also people discuss that to refer to the question about Bolivia, wasn't it Bolivia or Ecuador? Yeah, that also in Iceland we have this we have seen how big corporations come in to seek power, and the common colonial trade or the like post-colonial trade has been the local population takes a big loan. It makes all the infrastructure, the harbors, the dams, the facilities. The big corporation comes in and it extracts the resources. Yes, it pays a few locals for the work, but normally it does not pay taxes, and normally it actually does not leave anything but the waste and maybe the temporary payment of the workers. So that's something that, of course, if that's a pattern that can easily be replicated with windmills, with lithium, with aluminum, with clean energy. So you also have to discuss how clean energy and how clean energy transition can follow a colonial or like or this type of capitalist plundering. It can take place within the framework of the solution, and it's not a solution if it's just replicating a problem within a system that has been causing problems over the last 100, 200, 300 years.
I reply to, what's your name? About the responsibility. So responsibility of Europe and companies regarding their supply chain. This is a big, very important point because now the connection is globally. So there is no a company that produces in a circular way all their products. And in Europe, the Parliament is working on a new directive that I think will be published in 1 or 2 years' time about corporate responsibility. So all companies of medium and big dimension based in Europe, but also companies based outside Europe that want to work in Europe need to comply with this new regulation. That means that you have to verify and audit and demonstrate that all your supply chain, so your direct supplier, but also sub-suppliers, are compliant with environment and human rights. So I think this will be a very important point for European companies, but for the business in general, not to look only in their own areas, but also on the whole value chain. And for the other goal about the way to reach, I think that the choice of sustainability have to be convenient, but sometimes you have also to lose something. For example, if a person lives in Perugia and wants to go to the airports, their normal choice is I take my car, I start from my house and go to the airport. Now we are working on interconnectivity. So we have deployed some agreements with bus companies, and like the passenger can make only one ticket, for example, from Perugia to take the bus to come to Fiumicino and then to take the flight to New York. So it will be convenient from a logistic point. You make only one ticket, but you have to lose something. So you have to lose the facility to have the car just in front of your door and arrive just when you want. Our rule, our duty is to make this most easy. So for in the future, we think that you make the check-in at the starting of the train station or the bus station, you will give there your luggage and you find it at destination. So our utilized company is to make convenient this choice. From an economical point of view, also the connection with Fiumicino, there is the high-speed train Leonardo that costs 15 euros, but there is also the local train, the one that I took every day to go to my office, and that it's only 80 euros and makes some more stops, but arrives in the center of Rome, so to Tiburtina and so on. And it's always a choice based on cost, but also on your comfort to use it if you are close to the station and so on.
Mr. Tellini?
Thanks again for engaging us on different aspects of the transition, and I would say the implementation of what the circular transition is. First point is that we are talking about a transition. And so it requires time, effort, ingenuity, and resources. But as I was pointing at the beginning, this is a very personal choice, I would say, which starts with personal commitment in trying to understand that each of us has a tremendous potential in somehow shift the way the system works. I'm not naive. At the very same time, I believe that education is crucial, of course, for actual generation, for future generation, but in a sort of way of habilitating each of us in understanding that a different way is already possible. When I started my personal journey on a circular economy, I did realize, I would say all of a sudden, that I was given a sort of new freedom of thinking, because I was somehow elevating the perspective from just being too narrow. You know, now also in some management books, you read about the different operations that usually you have to control and manage. You have accountability, you have finance, you have marketing, and usually those are silos. So you have a sort of very specialized and vertical sort of way of doing things, very accurate, but also somehow isolated. What circular economy is proposing is to, again, elevate the perspective and try to see the interconnectedness. So you can see how everything is connected, is interdependent. This sort of acknowledgement gave myself a sort of profound understanding of how a different perspective could be applied to almost everything I was doing at that point in time. And so, again, of course, it's not easy, but the way we can think when look at circular economy and the circular way of thinking in terms of everything is interconnected, there is a biomimicry that we can derive from nature. Somehow there was also reflection about assets, about mobility, about, think for a second about the real estate sector. We are used to see buildings coming up and then demolition, buildings going down. And this is the standard approach. Well, what does it change from a circular perspective? That when you decide to build something, you build with a design which is already taking care of the different destination of utilization that you will make about the specific asset. But more importantly, people will design a building to be able to deconstruct the building afterwards. So you already know that you will need the resources that have been utilized to create a building somewhere else at a different stage in time. So when you build in this way, you create, of course, what is called a bank of materials. Technology is able to trace the value of those materials. But again, you start from the beginning. You start from rethinking the way you want to build assets, how you want to build buildings, how you want to do. And again, within the buildings, for example, you will not have, as always has been happening, it's still happening, for example, the elevator, right? There has been the linear way, which says, I buy the elevator and then I use it, fine, and I need to maintain it. But think for a second. You, as a sort of inhabitant of that asset, do you really need to own the elevator? What is going to happen is that compared to what's happening right now, you will not be sold the elevator anymore as a buyer. You will be given, you will be sold the access to the vertical mobility, because the constructor of the elevator wants to retain the ownership of that asset, because the resources that have been utilized to build the elevator are too precious for the builder for giving those to you. And personally speaking, I don't know what to do in terms of having all the steel, all the lights, and all the components of an elevator. This makes a huge difference, as I said, in the servitization model, in making sure that we do have appropriate utilization and relationship with resources. So closing, training, education is key. Personal commitment for sure. Why I was anticipating before the sort of relationship that the European Commission is promoting, because it's down to us. We, as citizens, we have a tremendous power in commanding demand. Today, we are still facing a sort of, I would say, transition in the circular economy. As I said at the beginning, we are still at the beginning, but we see companies putting out an offer which is coherent with the circular economy principles. What is really important, going to the point of how we can implement this, is that also the demand of circular economy is able to grow. And this is down to us. This is down to our personal sort of choices. When we do have a way of consuming, the way of utilizing resources, which is inspired and geared towards the circular economy approach, we are able to make a demand for circular economy which will be matched by the supply of circular economy goods and services. And this will make the economy, the circular economy, work. So in a nutshell, it's down to us. For sure, I'm not naive. There are resources. As I said, Intesa Sanpaolo, as a private player, it's making the leadership in this field. And you know, Intesa Sanpaolo is renowned internationally to be the leading bank in supporting the acceleration of the transition. But as I said, this is a systemic transition. This requires a sort of coordinated effort. But the most important aspect is that we do have all clear what is at stake. This is not just being green. And this is important. I mean, I would be the minimum. But the issue is not just to be green, is to have a competitive economy in the future. And in order for the economy to be competitive in the future, the change in business model, the change in materials, the change in the know-how, the change in technology, we already have the technologies. The issue is how we use those technologies to empower a shift in the business models, in the value creation, in the utilization of resources. And this is down to us as citizens first, and of course, as systems organization. And Intesa Sanpaolo as a bank, it's making its own effort, as I said, with finance, with advisory, with education. We are sitting we are working with supranational entities, we are working with the European Commission, we are working with Italian entities, with the Ministry for the Circular Economy strategy in Italy. The bioeconomy, the blue economy are being considered by the Italian government as the two engines of the circular economy. And in the consultation that was made by the Ministry, we were involved. But this, again, it's a role of an important actor like Intesa Sanpaolo, and we are for sure at the forefront of the efforts that can be made. But again, I believe that for the implementation and for the success of a sort of collective action for change, each of us can be, again, somehow the sort of actor for a different way of doing things, a different way of thinking when we look at the traditional habits. And this will make a profound change collectively going forward.
Thank you. And now, just to give an end to this meeting, I want to thank you for your presence. And I'd like to close this meeting with a consideration that the struggle for a sustainability, for a new sustainability policy, is not a question only of the government, only of the European Union, only of the other states, the United States and China, but it is a matter that involves all of us, that involve completely our style of life. And so I believe that with this consideration, that is consideration of these years, because 10 years, 20 years ago, no one on us was thinking in this way. And so I leave you with this new consideration, and I hope that this meeting could be of some useful for you and for your future. Thank you for you all and for your future.
All the best.
I'd like
Bye-bye.
to thank you, the audience, because I've been to a lot of workshops and never find the audience so present and so curious like you. So thank you.
All the very best. Bye-bye.
Middle groups are up.